Ooh, Ghana, I love Ghana.
Congratulations!
Ooh, Ghana, I love Ghana.
Congratulations! Congratulations!
Ghana,
Yeah, Ghana.
thank you, Ghana.
Congratulations! Congratulations!
Excuse me. I get sense.
Ghana grants citizenship to over 300 whites and non-Africans. Let's talk about it. First things first, welcome to Pan-African Perspectives, where we dive into real-life experiences of those visiting Africa, moving to the continent of Africa, investing in African ventures, and buying land. This is all with the ultimate goal of advancing Africa and restoring it to its rightful place on the world stage. Our mission is to support an independent Africa and empower African people on the continent or in the diaspora. Whether you're currently in Africa, you've recently migrated, your ancestors were trafficked during the transatlantic slave trade, or you're a foundational Black American, this live stream is for you. I'm Joe Hatagwa, your host and the founder of Authentic African. Each week, I'll share my experiences living, traveling, and investing in Africa. And from time to time, I'll also be interviewing others who've made the move to the continent, offering their insights and stories. And then also, from time to time, we'll talk about the news of the day. And so today, we're going to discuss the fact that Ghana recently made headlines by granting citizenship to 300 non-African individuals, white individuals, sparking a range of reactions, both domestically and internationally. While the move is seen by some as part of Ghana's broader efforts to strengthen ties with the global diaspora communities, many Ghanaians, Africans, and those in the African diaspora expressing dissatisfaction with how easily new citizens were granted status, especially when compared to rigorous process faced by others. Now, this development comes on the heels of Ghana's successful historic citizenship ceremony that took place in November of 2024, where 524 members of the African diaspora were granted Ghanaian citizenship. So today we're going to talk about the 300 plus white folks that were granted citizenship. And I'm going to give my honest opinions, my thoughts, my belief systems as to why it happened and everything you need to know about what happened. So before we do, I do need to know from you guys, can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, and also let me know where you're watching from. I see, but there are stories in Ghana where then they turn and take your land after putting blood, sweat, and tears. I wonder what process they had to go through for vetting. Can we request to get on the live with you? We can do that, not necessarily today, but at some point in time, I will allow people to get on live. It's scary, not going to know the motive until we do. On what grounds were they given citizenship? Shaking my head. I thought about this for a long and hard. We can't say diversity makes us all better, but then not practice it. Okay, on the other side, that's interesting. Afro-Carib is watching from Canada. Shout out to you. So yeah, I mean, I think there's an interesting thought process about diversity. I'll jump into that one for sure. But first of all, Shishi Dior is watching from Atlanta, and we're going to go back through that video, and I'm going to give you my thoughts as we go through the video, because there's some specific things on that video that I caught that many of you may not have caught. So we'll watch it together and we'll talk through it. That's just a couple of clips from the citizenship ceremony that took place a couple days ago. Shout out to Quado watching from Maryland. So you guys can hear me. You guys are watching. That's great. Roman says the audio is great. Watching from Texas. Great. Now this comment, so some people said they're very misguided. Oh, so we're not special at all. No, thanks, Ghana. I do not agree with it, but that's just my opinion. They populate and then they corroborate with the West to take over. That's some of the thoughts that people are saying. I hope it'll be easy for me to get one like that. Well, this is an interesting topic because we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. Trust me. So this person, let's address this specific Yeah, and Afro-Carib makes a good point, and that's the point that I'm going to get to in a moment. I'll put your comment on the screen when I get to it. But D Jello says, or D, I'm sorry, forgive me for getting it wrong, but you know the name is kind of tough to say on your IG name. I've thought about this long and hard. What we can't say diversity makes us all better, but then not practice this and on the other side. As long as it's just a small minority, no harm done, according to this person. Now, that's the way they think. I would not necessarily agree with that. I do think diversity of thought and diversity of folks matter when it comes to things like the United States and when you're representing diversity in the United States. For example, if you have a business that is a consumer business that is touching the general population, it makes sense for people who are on your board, people who are in senior leadership positions, people who are making that product to represent the folks that you have as customers. So, for example, there was very early in Slapchat's days, they had no folks of Asian descent in senior leadership, and they had a very offensive Facetune or whatever it was at the time. I can't remember what they were calling it. And they had to, once the general population found out about it, they made those changes. They also did the same thing with blackface. And so they had to make those corrections. But you wouldn't even make those. And also, if there were women, people of color, and many other types of folks, people who've dealt with people with mental illness on the board or in senior leadership at Facebook at the time that they launched the live streams, they would have maybe put some things in place to ensure that people aren't deleting folks, people aren't being bullied in certain ways. There are different things that should not be in live stream that are there because those people who created the live stream service at Facebook have never engaged or felt some of those things that those people who are now having the negative impact of live streams are seeing because they had no diversity of thought and no diversity in terms of, background. And I think in those cases, diversity is very important. I don't think it's necessary when it comes to giving citizenship in an African country. So no, I disagree with you completely on that. It's a completely different thing. It's not even close to the same thing. Not even close to the same thing. Because when they're talking about diversity in the United States, we're talking about ensuring that the country is represented in major businesses and politics and all these other places because the general population is inclusive of those groups and they're not represented. The United States talks about taxation without representation, right? That was a big issue when they formulated the country of the United States. And so that's why it makes sense to have diversity in those positions of power. That's a very different thing from offering citizenship to non-Africans on the continent of Africa. I don't know. You guys tell me if you guys agree with me. Let me know if I sound crazy. If that sounded educated, it sounded good coming out. It's the first time I said something like that out loud, but it's how I think. But you guys let me know what you guys think of that. My viewpoint on that. So there's some other thoughts I want to get through here real quick. Michael Bowen says, can't trust it, not good, from Illinois. Tim Black says the Chinese and Arabs want citizenship only for business purposes and they have no love or loyalty to Ghana or Ghanaians. That's Tim Black's opinion. Black Magic says, I had to shake my head when I heard about these people from non-African descent being granted Ghanaian citizenship. However, try telling that to some Ghanaian content creators who think that it is a flex. Interesting. I haven't seen that, but I don't know all the Ghanaian content creators. The ones that I know, I haven't seen them say that. But it says, so Head to Toe says, but there is stories of Ghana where they would turn and take your land after giving you citizenship and you buy it. A bunch of people said you can hear me. Shout out to Sororities in Brooklyn. Shout out to you. RJ Wee is watching from Savannah, Georgia. So we got a bunch of people from all over the world. Katrine is watching from New York. Carmel says, I would love to get dual citizenship application for Ghana. K. Cole Dot said, just left Ghana, now in Italy, I guess. Going to Liberia in 3 days. I'm Liberian, but born in the United States. By the way, I did that all based on looking at the flags that they put up there. You guys, use the country names when you're saying where you're watching from and where you're going. I'm not the best at knowing where all the flags are from everywhere around the world. So that was really hard to do. I'm pretty sure that's Italy. I don't know. I don't know the European flags that well, but I do know West African flags. So that's the Liberia flag and the Ghanaian flag. So I think that's where you said you were going. Kwame says, hello. What's up, Kwame? Kojo Mensch says, one thing about Black people is we want to go to white people's countries, but we don't want them to come to our country. That's insane. Oh, there's a difference between coming to the country and getting citizenship. Now, Kojo, here's something to think about. How difficult is it for an African to get citizenship in what you're calling a white people's country? So let's say in the West, the global North, that's the way it's commonly described, right? So in Europe or the United States, let's think about how hard it is for Ghanaians to get citizenship in those places, or Nigerians or Sierra Leoneans or Africans in general, right? How about the Muslim majority country bans that have gone into effect under a previous administration that may be going back into effect under the next administration, possibly? You know, so think about how difficult it is to get citizenship in these countries. And so there's a difference between going to a country and getting citizenship. What we're talking about is non-Africans getting citizenship in an African country. So that's a very different thing. So this is what Michael E. Bowen is saying, started the 21st colonization. Frank says, nothing wrong with giving citizenship for non-Africans. Black people go to Europe and American acquire citizenship while Black people don't complain. Again, they don't acquire citizenship that easily, right? It's not in a one fell swoop, boom, a whole bunch of people in one day, right? It's a very difficult thing to get citizenship, as you probably know by your name. I would imagine you probably have immigrated to the West, or if you haven't, then attempt it, and you'll see how difficult it is. I saw that on BBC that Indians were opening schools that excluded Ghanaians in Ghana. I don't know anything about that, but that's a possibility. Tim Watch is watching from Atlanta, Georgia. Kwame says, I think around 80 or so were given citizenship. Zongo Native says, you didn't read my earlier comment. Zongo Native, I'm not sure your earlier comment came through. Sometimes they don't show up. Depending on what you wrote, YouTube sometimes filters them out. All right. Black Magic says, trust and believe these new non-Africans of Ghana will be the... Come on, these words. You guys are really, this is like the SATs, the progenitors of the Vivek Ramaswamis of the future, i.e. gatekeepers. Watch this space. Interesting. I like the $300 words that you use there. Another 220 plus Africans were also given citizenship. So I think the comment is saying that 80 or so were non-Africans, 220 were Africans. So Quadro says, exactly, Joe, folks are missing important. It's extremely difficult for non-white Africans to get citizenship in white non-black countries, or the global North or the West. However, I think people are missing the point about how easy it was for those non-Africans to get citizenship in Africa. Black Brown Skin says the advantages from colonization is that they will have generational wealth to buy land in Africa. Again, huge disadvantage for the Africans, of course, from the UK. Shout out to you, Black Brown Skin. All right, so we got any other comments on IG? A couple people in the US. So Joe Thomas says, I'm in the USA, a part of the diaspora, and I don't approve of it. Okay. Sheila says they populate, then they dominate. Interesting rhyme scheme there. Let's see what else we have. Sage Femme says they can get citizenship, but education system will be filled with the new raw truth, pictures and all. So as long as they can simmer with the truth, thoughts. I mean, I don't know if that's the case. I don't know how much you know about West Africa, but a lot of times European history is taught very frequently. It just is what it is. Even when people get their law degrees, especially in Sierra Leone, I noticed that they wear the European wigs and all of that. So I'm not 100% sure these truths that you're mentioning will shine through for those. Sorry, need to hydrate. Those of you who've been on the live streams forever know, no matter what country I'm in, I always am hydrating as much as possible. All right, so sapiens evolved through admixture. Diversity in populations makes us human. With that said, I would have loved to see to move to Ghana, only seen us. Okay, well, that's an interesting viewpoint. Why can't we just have stuff on our own? Like, why we have to be diverse in every aspect? Well, I think that I mentioned that before. We still got white and Mexican only towns, churches, restaurants, and bars. Why do we have to keep diversity? You don't sound crazy, but then you should not have to explain that diversity issue so deeply. Have we all graduated high school? Well, I mean, listen, I don't think we want to like necessarily make disparaging remarks about the audience. You know, everybody's at differing degrees of understanding of different things. So, you know, I think it's important for us to presume that everybody doesn't have all the information and we share information that way. Just because someone is not well versed in one particular topic doesn't make it mean that they're not smart. So I do want to be clear. I read that comment out loud. That's the opinions of someone, not me. I am humble enough to know that just because I know one thing doesn't mean I know something else, and that doesn't make me less valuable than anyone else. So, you know, I'm one of those people that explain it to me plain. If I don't know it, please, I'm happy to get that information. So I'm happy to share as much as I can. Martin Luther King said the biggest mistake is desegregation. We should have kept to ourselves and a community would have been stronger. You know, that is a conversation I've had with a Black nationalist about 15 years ago when I first started having these kinds of conversations about desegregation and Black consciousness, you know, as I was growing in my own consciousness prior to my whole Pan-Africanism and before even starting Authentic African. And I had a conversation with someone who I think there may be like, you know, 10 generations in America. And one of the things they said to me was, we supported our own businesses, taught ourselves, and we're thriving more under segregation than we are under desegregation. And he believed that we should not have had desegregation in the United States. And so I thought that was an interesting viewpoint, and I didn't know what to think of it because I had been taught something completely different prior to that. And so I think that is something to think about, and it's an interesting one. I have points on either side. We're not going to spend too much time on that, but I think that's an interesting thought process. I want to get to some more of these comments on Instagram before I get to some more of the YouTube comments, because the YouTube comments I can put on screen, the ones from Instagram I can't, and they come in a whole lot faster on Instagram. So let me just get to those. By the way, those of you who are just joining, we're talking about the fact that it is out there in the news that 300 plus non-Africans, or what they're saying are whites, white people, European descent, were offered citizenship in Ghana just after the 524 people of African descent were offered citizenship in Ghana. So there's controversy surrounding it, and we're talking about it. So Fredo 800 says, if we are all souls and spirits having a human experience, what is the importance of image? Is Putin welcome? Until the color of a man's skin is no more significant than the color of his eyes. I think, well, that's interesting. I don't know if Putin is welcome, but I think what's important to understand here is this. It's the ease of citizenship that was given to certain folks. And to be very clear, how about this? Try this one on for size for those of you who don't know. I know personally, one personal friend of mine was not granted citizenship because she had citizenship in Sierra Leone and in the United States. Someone else mentioned to me 2 sisters and a couple of other people who were refugees from Sudan and from, I think someone else was from the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, because even though they're refugees, they were granted citizenship initially in those countries and were living in the West. So living in the UK or living in the US, and they decided they wanted to make Africa their home, and they had chosen Ghana. And through that process, they were applying for citizenship, and they did not receive citizenship because they already had a home. Even though they left as refugees and sought asylum elsewhere, they were not given citizenship. And these are Africans that were not given citizenship because they, quote unquote, already had a home. So I think this is really important information for people to have, because I don't know how many people are aware of that. So that 524 people wasn't the total number of people who should have received citizenship. It was the total number of people who they decided to give citizenship on that fateful day in November, which was an exciting day for all of us. I reported on it. I went live with Ivy Prosper and we talked about it. But there were many people that they missed through that process for the reasons I just explained. So, Sage Femme is saying the advantages of colonialism is that they've been granted generation of wealth to buy land. Okay, so it was written twice. Why wouldn't Black people be reluctant of Caucasian people migrating to their countries? Are we not supposed to learn from history? That is an interesting question that they posed. Okay, what else do we have? White English father, Afro-Caribbean mother, Bob Marley. Yes, that is true. Bob Marley did come from two different family backgrounds on either side of his family. Not sure how that applies here, but that is true. Eba 1484 says, how do I get on the YouTube channel he's talking on? Just go to YouTube, Authentic African on YouTube, and just go straight to my page. You'll see the logo that you see on the upper right hand corner here, and that'll be the most recent live video that you'll be able to find. All right, the biggest problem is us against ourselves. We got to be truthful. That's a comment. IBA 1484 says, please read the Black People Oath. It talks about from the beginning of time, and it's important spies to have us colonize. Oh, okay, from the beginning of time to implant spies to have us colonize. Okay, that's what you're saying. Okay, so interesting viewpoint. All right, so those are all the comments from Instagram. Now let's get back to the YouTube comments and put some of these up on the screen. Okay, there's a lot of comments here, so I want to make sure I get to everyone. There's a lot here. All right. So Michael said, start of 21st century colonization. Frank says, nothing wrong with giving citizenship to non-African Black people. Go to your, okay, we've already talked about that. This was, okay, so I've actually read all of those, sorry. Okay, I read that one too. Okay, the advantages of colonization, I've already read that one. Africa in general have an issue with accepting non-Black foreigners, but discriminating against fellow Black Africans. It's very strange. Let me tell you guys something that is so true. There have been a few occasions where I've been going to restaurants and I get serviced after someone who comes in after I do, who is of European descent. I've seen the reverence that has been given to those of European descent, and I've seen it in a couple of countries. Specifically, I saw it in Sierra Leone, and I've seen it in Ghana, where people of Caucasian descent or European descent walk into an establishment, and it's like, oh, yes, sir. And then like run over to them. It's crazy. It is crazy. Now, it doesn't happen everywhere. It doesn't happen all the time, but I've definitely seen it happen. And, just run right past you to go deal with them. Or if the two of you walk in somewhere and you're right in front of the person, they will definitely look around you to them to start servicing them before you. It's happened to me on many occasions. And, this is all, anecdotal, my own specific experience, but it does happen. And it is interesting to see. I think a lot of that has to do with what I've talked about before, the idea that many of the NGOs and the nonprofits and those giving money to the country come from the people who are in charge tend to be of European descent. If you worship your deity and it is of European descent, blonde hair, blue eyes, you have it above your bedroom door in your house as somebody walks in. If you see that your deity, your person you worship as European looking, then of course you're going to see them as higher on the totem pole than you are. It's just going to be psychologically ingrained in who you are and how you respond to them. It's just how it is. And I've talked about this on many occasions, but that's just it is what it is. So Michelle Joyner says, brown skin, Black brown skin facts. African governments are going to have to limit foreign investment. China and India certainly do that to Blacks and foreigners on their land. Zongo Native says, have you dug into the basis of why they were issued citizenship? Perhaps they were married to Ghanaians and have businesses that contribute to key sectors of society. So there was a process to do the interview, much like for the Black Americans. But from what I understand, the criteria wasn't too tough. Tim Black says, hit the like button. What do you mean easily? Criteria wasn't difficult. That's what I mean by easily. Frank says, I don't think you know when non-Africans started to apply Africa or Ghanaian citizenship. It could be years ago before they acquired citizenship. Yeah, anything is possible. I don't know when all of these people applied for citizenship and when it was granted. That is true. We don't have those details as of yet. So yeah, so you know, some of them could have been doing it for a long time, but as far as I understand, many of them are recent. But what we'll get into, we're gonna break down this video because I think there's more to it than everything I've just said. Mike Porter says this is not good. Antonio says, I've been trying to get residency and/or citizenship in Ghana, haven't had much success. Good for those who got it. However, they got it. Okay. Kwame says the government has got this all wrong. Pro Woman says, have you connected with African American Association, Dr. Kambon, and the Diaspora Forum there in Ghana? Most people who got it went through them. That is a very good point. A friend of mine told me it was the African American Association that they were a part of where they first got notice that the citizenship capabilities were there. And I would say even some people of the diaspora got citizenship very easily as well. Some people had never even been to Ghana and got citizenship. So it's interesting, right? They had some very strict criteria that they were following. And there were some people who kind of got in through the cracks in some way, shape, or form. I've heard all kinds of anecdotal insights. You know, it's something that I think has really frustrated many folks. You know, and I think it's important that we call these things out, you know. Sorry, I'm getting multiple calls because, you know, Africans like to call 100 times in a row. What do you want to be? Sorry, my phone, everything is reacting and responding. Okay, sorry, my phones are going crazy. Oh my God. And it's not anything that has to do with this live stream. It's like, you know, people. One thing you'll find out about West Africans in general is when they call you once and you don't answer, they call back again and again and again and again and again, regardless of the relation to you, family, friends, whoever. It just happens. So apologies. It's distracting. So I had to like turn my do not disturb on because my phone was ringing like literally 5 calls in a row. So anyway, and I had to just send a text message. All right. So so Afro-Carib says, I understand the fears of neo-colonization. They are valid. However, to be fair, Ghana wants to develop its infrastructure. There's a vacuum because the Black diaspora seems reluctant to invest. Well, so there's a couple of points that are being made there. And I think that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a citizen to invest, right? Foreign direct investment is at an all-time high in Ghana, regardless of whether or not it's coming from Africans in the diaspora or other folks. Ghana sees an increase in investments every year and is had the highest increase in investment for foreign direct investments in terms of like tech investing and other non-tech sectors than I think pretty much any other country on the continent of Africa. So whether there are fears from the Black diasporans who are moving there to invest doesn't mean that investment's not already there. So then there is no need to offer citizenship in order to improve investment. It's actually not needed whatsoever. Now, let me get to some more of these questions and comments. Pro Women says, I agree, but Africans and diaspora Africans have to step up to replace these foreign investors instead of focusing on just partying and real estate investments. But real estate investments, I will say, is probably the more stable of the investments that you can make on the continent. I actually tend to remind people and recommend that people invest in real estate more than any other sector sooner than any other sector because it's something that you probably already have a frame of reference for. And if you're going to park your money anywhere, you might as well park your money somewhere and make that money back. So I'm not going to say I'm in agreement with that. Black Magic says people conflate Africans having citizenship in Western countries with Westerners having citizenship in Africa. They forgot that the primary reason why Black people are dispersed is because of their atrocities, meaning the Westerners' atrocities. Very true. Antonio says, pro-women. Dr. Cambone, I met, but he didn't mention he could help me. I heard about the African-American, that group in Ghana, but I didn't know how to connect with them, and I'm not familiar with the Diaspora Forum or how to contact. Maybe we'll have a conversation with somebody on that in the future. Pro-woman says, good point, but other groups have sovereign governments backing them and haven't been shut out of wealth in their nations like Black diasporans have. Afro-Carib says that Zongo Native is spot on. Did the Europeans prove that they are African descent? No, they did not. They didn't have to. Eric Powell says they just won't learn. Is that Andre 3 Stacks as your profile picture? Shishi Dior says, oh, wow. Black Magic says, Tim Black, well said. Segregation is what is in the pipeline. Indians have lived in Africa for centuries and have never intermarried, learned African cultures or languages. Prowan says, I've experienced that too, meaning when in Africa, the Europeans get preferential treatment. In Ghana, Togo, and Benin, it's a problem in Africa. First face it, then let's fix it. Steven says, additional over 100 Black descendants were given citizenships that same day that white were given citizenships. You refuse to it. I think he's saying I refuse to say it. So I actually mentioned that earlier, and we're going to talk about it too. So Yasha says, oh, good, I found you. I'm glad you found it. I'm going to Ghana Diaspora Bay customize a home for us Africans to transition. The tribe of Judah is ready to come home. I've never been. I'm ready. Definitely go for sure. That's a huge no-no, and will get you blocked if you call me a lot of times. Yes, but sometimes it's family. Caribbean Africa culture says that's crazy. Real talk. Tim Black says Africans will wake up when the Indians take over and look at East Africa, their own countries after they got citizenship and patronize each other and not the native populations. I think you're speaking to like Tanzania and Kenya. That is a complaint I hear in East Africa frequently. All right. So let's go back and watch this video because I do think it's important that we talk about a few things. So number one, that 300 number, I've looked deeper into it and it's not 300. Now, some people are on this live stream are throwing out 80. Some people have said it's been 200. Some people said 100 people on that day were Black who've gotten citizenship. And there's a lot of conversations about who and how many. But let's watch this video again. And I think this will give a little bit more insight into what we're dealing with. So let's watch it again from the beginning.
Oh, Ghana, oh, Ghana.
So now, if you're looking at some of this complexions of some of these folks, what I can tell you is what I'm seeing here is folks that somewhat maybe potentially Lebanese, somewhat Middle Eastern. What I heard, what you find a lot on the continent of Africa, especially in West Africa, is non-Africans are almost always called white. So like I don't know if you've ever seen those maps of how like certain groups in America classify everyone else. Well, a lot of Africans do something similar. So what you'll find is some people will classify all Asians as Chinese. Then they'll classify all non-Blacks as white. So if someone is Latin American, if someone is Middle Eastern, they just say they're all white, right? So like I've heard people call Lebanese folks white, right? Now there's, the question you have to ask yourself is what do they call themselves when they're filling out job applications? I hear many of them do call themselves white. So, I mean, maybe that's a proper classification because of how, when Europeans came up with the idea of white, Black, when they decided to name races in that way, they didn't really think through all of the different complexions around the spectrum. They just said Africa is Black. And they said they are white, right? So there's kind of everything in between. And even on the continent of Africa, you have all kinds of complexions. We're the most genetically diverse continent on the planet. And so it's very difficult to just say everybody in Africa is Black. But anyway, I do think that that is one of the things that has led to this idea of all of these quote unquote white people getting citizenship.
Thank you, Ghana.
So you see these folks, right? Obviously, these folks are of some descent that doesn't necessarily seem to be fully European, not all of them. Right? Now, this gentleman here, I think, you know, I don't think anybody would argue that that gentleman that just crossed the screen is likely of, like, you know, Anglo-Saxon, right? I'm gonna say the EU. Some of these other folks here, these niggas Africans here on the left, and the gentleman who we're talking about here, these two guys are Lebanese. And one thing I would say is, from what I understand, if it's not Palace Mall, one of the major malls in Accra is owned by Lebanese. Lebanese have been in West Africa for over 100 years. And so many of them even are multiple generations living on the continent and consider themselves African. So I do think it is important to call that out, right? So these aren't just European people, right? If you're looking at this video more closely, right, you're seeing a spectrum of folks that don't necessarily look Anglo-Saxon European all the way. Now, some do, some don't. So what? Right? I think the point that most people are making is that they're non-Africans, and many of them do not have the same kind of appreciation for Africans moving to their country, and don't do large swaths of citizenship to their country. Any of the countries, we'll talk about it. Let's say Lebanon or India or China or any of the other Middle Eastern countries that we find on the continent of Africa, or anywhere in Europe, or the United States, right? Which is why there's so many issues with illegal migration in these countries, because they don't offer citizenship to these folks very easily. So you don't have moments like what we just saw there. So there's some more comments I want to get to. Hello from Georgetown, Washington, D.C. Black people around the world should invest in Africa, period. I agree. Ibrahim Traore is changing the narrative about Mama Africa. I agree. Sade says, Africans must realize that all money isn't good money, and Indians and Europeans are ready and willing to spend just to turn around and discriminate against the natives and African Americans. That is her opinion, or their opinion, I should say. Pro Woman says, can Black people get citizenship in China or India? No Black businesses in Chinatowns in the US, but lots of Chinese-owned businesses in Black communities. Just saying. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point. I mean, the neighborhood that I live in has largely gentrified, but there was a Chinese restaurant and a liquor store here since I moved here in 2004, when I first moved into this neighborhood. And they are both owned by Chinese. Okay, so four businesses. Sorry, a laundromat, a dry cleaner, a liquor store, and laundromat, dry cleaner, liquor store, and what was the other business I was just talking about? Oh, a Chinese restaurant, obviously, are all owned by Chinese folks that were in this neighborhood, largely Black neighborhood that is now gentrified. But those were the four main businesses that were here and have been here. You know, I don't think you should discriminate against anyone starting a business, right? Because, look, businesses pay rent to someone, generally employ people. There's generally a benefit to the area. I just don't know if granting citizenship is necessary to those folks. I think you should make citizenship as difficult as they make it for you. I think that it should be reciprocated. And for those of us who, because the idea of granting all that citizenship in November was because many people of Black and African descent were brought to the Americas unwillingly, right? And it's the idea of giving them a second home. Many of the people who went to the Americas or went to the UK who are of European descent, the large majority of them went willingly. So they decided to make those their new homes. Whereas many of people of African descent don't have a separate home that they could have gone back to, right? And so I think the idea of offering citizenship in large groups to those folks makes a lot of sense. I don't know if it makes a lot of sense to offer that citizenship to folks of other descendants and backgrounds. Agree or disagree? That's the way I see it. I think we should reciprocate. I also think the continent of Africa should do a better job of offering visas to other Africans more easily. It is incredible to me that as a Sierra Leonean American, I can travel to many countries on the continent of Africa, land and do a visa on arrival with my US passport, but I have to go through a 3-week plus process to get a visa with my Sierra Leonean passport. That's crazy. We're on the same continent. So yeah, these are problems that we have. And I think the preferential treatment to Europeans is included in something like this. I mean, or non-Africans, right? I think the idea, and look, I think it was done the way it was done quickly, and a bunch of them right before the outgoing administration leaves, so that it can just kind of be done quickly. It's like when a president in the United States pardons a bunch of people right on their way out, right? It's the same kind of thing. I feel like it has a very similar thing. But in this instance, it's kind of like, I like the idea of what they did in November. It was like a thing to be proud of Ghana for, especially with Sierra Leone changing some of its citizenship standards. I was excited to see that Ghana was offering citizenship, but now it just kind of seems watered down because it's not the same. It's not with the same kind of backstory to it that they originally offered citizenship to folks in November for, right? It's a very different thing now when you're offering citizenship to non-Africans, because then what is the reason for that? So yeah, so Pro Woman said most people did look of Middle Eastern or Indian descent. Nana is watching from Mississippi. I enjoy your vlogs. They're always very informative. Keep up the great work, keeping us informed. Thank you. I appreciate that. Face Mask says, my dad's son, have you ever seen human beings look like white paper towel before? And I answered my dad, no. Oh, my dad's okay. Your dad said to you, son, have you ever seen human beings look like white paper towel before? And my answer to my dad was no. Yes, exactly. The idea of white and black is purely misguided. I remember when I was first learning my colors, and I was like, I'm brown, they're pink or off-white. So I was confused by that as a child too. And I've seen it with kids all the time. It happens all the time when kids are learning their colors and then learning about race, and it's hard to make sense of it because it doesn't make sense. I mean, we are still naming things based on the ideas of the world over 150 years ago, right? And those people didn't know anything. Shishi, as they say. They didn't know shishi. But yeah, we still talk about people in those same ways. Mimi says, are they trying to bring South Africa to Ghana? We Africans will wear 4 eyes. We are now in the driver's seat. Sylvia says, I'm not shocked, especially since there's a U.S. military base there. Face Mask says, Africa's only hope is we get black people, so let's hold her like an egg. Okay. Tim Black says, the Lebanese do not consider themselves Africans. They consider themselves Arabs in Africa. When they look for wives or husbands, they go back to Lebanon. Good point. When I was saying that I should say maybe some consider themselves Africans. But you're right. Many of them do not intermarry, but many do. I don't want to call anybody out in particular. I know about 3 people who are a result of intermarriages between Lebanese and Sierra Leoneans. Specifically, I know 3 people personally. And so I will say that it does happen from time to time, but you're right. And the large majority tend to stick to their own culture. It is just what it is. Black Brown Skin says, just wanted to share that Ibrahim Traore said, soon enough, you'll be knocking at our continent with our places, with our gold head to toe. In one of his speeches when President Macron berated them. Yes, he did. Zongo Native says, they look Lebanese to me, and most of them came to Ghana way before independence. Diaspora and Africans need to step up and replace the businesses they're creating in the economy. Ghanaians want services. I believe that. Sade says, I know a Nigerian now who has family in the US but isn't able to get a visa. So forget about citizenship. I don't know. They just make everything harder for us, but we make it easy for them. Black Magic says, do you know that Kenya recognized Indians who live there as the 44th tribe? However, India, they practice the caste system and Black people are treated despicably. Have you heard of the cities? Tim Black says he is aware. Yeah, I mean, they do have a caste system in India. I am very well aware of that. I went to New Delhi. I did have an incredible time, but I was also hosted by a family who was very progressive and invited us to the wedding, and was very, very hospitable, very wealthy family, treated us like family. But I know that that is not the case for all. In fact, I know Indian Americans who I've heard things that they've said about Black people that they didn't know I know that they said it. Former work colleagues, former boss actually said something wild to his sister-in-law about if she was to ever marry a Black man. And I remember he said to me once, you know, when I explained like my family circumstances growing up in terms of finances and everything, he was just confused because he was like, there's no way that you could have been born you know, and living in, you know, a certain economic circumstance to be who you are today. He was like, you had to be the children of like doctors and lawyers. I thought your parents were like the Huxtables. Because his assumption is that if you come from, you know, a underprivileged background, you're not able to, you know, be in the same room as somebody like him, which is interesting because he came from an underprivileged background. So he seems to believe as an Indian immigrant to America, he can move up the socioeconomic ladder, but someone like myself cannot, because for whatever reason, we don't have those same capabilities. It's ingrained in his head. He didn't even know what he was saying when he was saying it to me. But I knew what he was saying. And then I later found out the thought process he has about Black people. And this is somebody who spent, you know, at the time that I met him, you know, 30 plus years in America, and he had this viewpoint. Zongo Native, you're being unfairly critical of the diaspora without accounting for historical injustices. Diaspora remits more money to Africa than most foreign aid to African nations. That's what Pro Women says. Sylvia says, fact is, Black people have always been in the USA, so this too is their home. Euro equals history is lying about the subject as usual. Yeah, so, okay, so there is this concept of foundational Black Americans. Abu Bakr II sailed west with initially 200 ships. This is Mansa Musa's father. Father, grandfather, some people dispute that, but whatever. It's Mansa Musa's either direct father or grandfather. Sailed west. Some people say 200 ships. Some people say 2,000 ships. Some people say 1,100 men and women, whatever. Christopher Columbus and many others who have written accounts of their experiences on the continent of Africa speak to meeting people who look like Africans. In fact, there are a lot of indigenous Native Americans who speak about people of African descent. So I do think that there are a large number of folks who don't know where they come from that would prefer to call themselves foundational Black Americans, because I don't know if anybody wants to have to have the idea that slavery is in your history. I am a descendant of enslaved Africans myself. You know, I am of the Creole tribe of Sierra Leone, and there are likely and former enslaved Africans in my history, especially because my mother's maiden name is Davies, Davies. That is a British name. So, you know, of course we have, you know, that in my, somewhere in my background. So I understand not wanting to have that in your background. I used to always think that I was like 100% African, and I used to try to, you know, use that as a flex and say that to people. And I later found out that that's not necessarily the case. And it's tough to have that, to know that. So I understand, but we don't know how many people are foundational Black Americans. I think there are a lot of people who discuss it and try to figure it out. You know, you try to look at your lineage and maybe you can find that out. I think many people who have Native American in their lineage and in their background just automatically assume that they are foundational Black Americans, and that's probably a pretty good assumption. But we don't know how many of people who are considered Black or African American in America are of descendants of enslaved Africans or descendants of those foundational Black Americans who came long before Christopher Columbus. Antonio says, I have a question. When will other African nations follow suit and offer citizenship as well? Why just Ghana or Sierra Leone? Why not Nigeria and so forth? That is a great question, and I wish I knew the answer to that question. This is a conversation I've had so many times before. Until Ghana granted citizenship in those like large groups of people, I would always say Sierra Leone's really the only country that offers citizenship via DNA, which is still true. But now they're making some adjustments and changes to make it more difficult now. And I'll have somebody on in the near future to talk about that. So that's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate because I'd like to see more of it. You know, the more people you have coming back, the better off we all are, right? So Sadara says, also businesses and housing should benefit the native Ghanaians too. Otherwise, we're making it harder for them. 100%. Is it Ufoma? Says, lovely conversation. I just think we are all selling into the same racist narratives, which we Black people seem to be affected with. Denying citizenship based on race saddens me. I hope we see humans. I don't think you should deny citizenship based on race. I think you should have a normal citizenship process that you have. But if you want to accelerate citizenship, it should be based on what happened with the transatlantic slave trade. You have to remember that the year of return in 2019 was marking 400 years since the start of the transatlantic slave trade. And the idea was to do the year of return and then the beyond the return, because there is a point of no return at many of the major coasts in which Africans were trafficked to the West. And so the idea of offering citizenship to those folks is part of the whole beyond the return activities, people who've been on the continent, who have been in Ghana, or new folks that have recently been to Ghana who are looking to get more involved and get citizenship. And so I do think that you should offer an accelerated pathway for those kinds of folks. And I think you can still offer citizenship the same way other countries offer citizenship, through the hoops that people have to jump through for people who are non-Africans. Of course. But let's think of it this way. Who do you think it's easier to get citizenship for? Somebody from the UK or somebody from Uganda in the United States? You guys answer that question for me. And if you know the answer to that question, then you should think about how we as Africans should be doing the same thing. I think we should reciprocate. That's all I'm saying. You guys tell me if you agree or you disagree with me. I mean, I don't take an opinion or a stance very much as fervently as I do on this one, but that's because I'm very passionate about this as someone who's a dual citizen and who has a friend who was denied citizenship to Ghana. I take this one personally. So agree or disagree, I don't care if you disagree. That's just how I believe. That's what I believe. Black Brown Skin says, worldwide, Africa have 70% of the youngest people under 30. So huge advantage from UK. Mosi says, what has changed for Sierra Leone citizenship for the diaspora? More to come on that soon. I don't have the details as of yet. I have been told some things without details. I want to have somebody who's kind of more of an expert who has the details come on the live stream. We'll talk about that. But since we've been talking about citizenship the last couple of weeks, I definitely am looking forward to having this discussion very soon. Because this is a conversation that we need to have, and we've been having on this channel and this platform for some time. Fitzroy says, Africa for Africans at home and abroad. Marcus Garvey. Shout out to Marcus Garvey. Caroline says, most of the Lebanese in Ghana are refugees who have been naturalized just like it's done in America. We Blacks must replace them. I don't know about replacing. I just think that we should also offer value. I don't like the idea of replacing all that kind of stuff. Like that reminds me of the great replacement theory stuff that people talk about here and all that. Yeah, I don't really like the idea of replacing. I just like the idea of educating, onboarding, accelerating, and offering value as well. You know, that's my thought process. Black Brown Skin says all the race, creed, religion, beliefs, etc. comes down to education and rewriting and teaching true history. We can't be stuck in the same subject. Also, Russia and China never colonized Africa. True, they never colonized Africa. No one said they did. However, they also don't offer citizenship. Right? So that two things can be true. Right? Two things can be true. Fred Bantu says all first people in any continent were of African origin. Yes, that is true. I think that's what most scientists agree with anyway. Black Brown Skin says Kemi Saba says next presidential elect extend his love for Black people everywhere. Haiti, Guyana, Martinique, Guadeloupe, everywhere. All right, so real quick, I see a bunch of new people joining. We are talking about the fact that 300, at least the claim is that 300 non-Africans, white people actually is how it was described in all the news outlets and how it was described, were offered citizenship in Ghana just a couple of days ago, less than about a week ago. And so we're just talking about that. We went through and watched the video. We kind of talked about who we think actually got citizenship. And there's a little bit of a debate in terms of how people see these things. So I'm just addressing all the comments and thoughts as they come along. Let me see if there's anything on IG about this. People need to view their brains as a corrupted chip to purify. We have a bias and it comes from society that has been poisoned by colonialism. That's an interesting viewpoint. I'm not going to say I disagree with that. I think that is interesting. And I do think sometimes we do need to wash our brains. You sometimes do need to be brainwashed, but meaning clean it from what you've learned previously. I had to be. As someone who went to a boarding school, a predominantly PWI, as they say, and I went to boarding school in Hershey, Pennsylvania, Anglo-Saxon Christians were those who were teaching every course, except for a couple of teachers, which I really do remember. Shout out to Mrs. Galloway. Shout out to my coaches, Smitty, Mr. Galloway, and all of you who were pivotal in my life. I also had, Caucasians that were pivotal, like, Coach Geyer and others. But, it does tend to taint your view of history if you're taught a certain way by certain people with certain view and lens. Everything I've learned about the Moors and how how they spent their time on the continent of Africa, or the fact that math, geography, geometry, many of the earliest scholars were of Arab descent. I've learned all of that in the last 5 years of my life, and I'm 40 years old. So I can't believe I can say that I'm 40. Soon to be 41. So yeah, so these things are all really important to know, and I do think we need a brainwashing. That is true. I agree. But in a different sense of the word, in the phrase. Let's see. So Sade says, the stereotype against Black people doesn't stop just because someone gets citizenship. Also, there will be prejudice on all sides. We will have to learn to live amongst each other in peace. I don't disagree with that. FBA is Tariq Fan Club. Okay. Foundational Black Americans. So I think his name is Tariq Nasheed. He's probably the loudest person, the person with the, I should say not the loudest, I should say the person with the biggest megaphone who speaks for Foundational Black Americans. I think, no group is a monolith. I think there are some people who are Foundational Black Americans who agree with everything he says, and there's some people who don't. And I think he considers himself Foundational Black American. And then on the other side, you have folks like Dr. Umar, who's also a loud person who calls himself the Prince of Pan-Africanism. And it seems to be there's two warring sectors between the two of them, which now sometimes trickles into their audiences. But I think we all need to work together. Foundational Black Americans, Africans in the diaspora from the transatlantic slave trade, whatever it looks like. I think we all need to work together because at the end of the day, we are the one large group that has been separated the longest across the furthest geographical boundaries. and that makes it very difficult for us to work together. Facts, African Americans, i.e. people from African descent. Ms. S says Benin is also offering citizenship. Good news about this, you can apply from your own country via the Benin embassy. The information comes from the press release from the Benin government. That's interesting. If you could send me, well, I'll look it up. That's interesting. I didn't know about that. I read that Burkina Faso is welcoming African Americans. Yes, officially they are. I just don't know what that process is. You know, if you guys might remember, for a while I was going live with African Stream and Inem Richardson, who is Nigerian American. She is living in Burkina Faso right now, so I'll have to get a check-in with her on what that process looks like. Quadro says, too easy. You agree with me? Agree-ish on what? Which one? What did I say? Do you agree-ish on? Fred says agreed. I know I'm getting to these comments a little bit later, so these are comments based on things that I've said maybe like 5-10 minutes ago. So sorry. I am who I am says, why was your friend denied Ghanaian citizenship? Great question. I'm glad you asked it. She was denied Ghanaian citizenship because she had citizenship in Sierra Leone and the United States. They said citizenship to Ghana is only for those who don't have another home. At least that particular group of citizenship offering. So that was why she was not given citizenship. And then, as I mentioned, there were people from Sudan who were refugees, who went to the West, who came back to Africa to make Ghana their home, had been living in Ghana, applied for Ghanaian citizenship, and were not granted citizenship because they, quote unquote, already had a home. That's a problem. That's a big problem. And so, you know, obviously exceptions should be made. One of the things I always say about Ghana is Ghana follows a lot of the rules. They make rules and they follow rules. They're rule followers. I think other countries are a little bit more lenient when it comes to specific rules. I noticed that I feel like Ghanaians tend to follow the rules a little bit more than other countries, but yeah, I think they should have made exceptions. Do you remember the days of slavery? They came as friends. One day they will change. That's interesting. That's what your belief system. Okay, so Kathy Ann Crosby thinks that that's going to be the challenge that we see with the non-Africans getting citizenship. Possibly. Everything isn't based on race, but let's read the room, people. Are they favorable to us as we are to them? Where has that gotten us in the long run? History will repeat if we don't learn the game. Antiquity Queen says, more of the same tricks. This is how we always end up at the bottom or last. In 50 years, they will be the majority. When will we learn? Black Magic says, I could disagree with, I couldn't disagree more, because I could disagree more means you mostly agree, if I'm not mistaken, right? So we live at a time where all around the world, countries are tightening their borders and Africans are the scapegoats. So we can't welcome them within with open arms. I could disagree with you more. But I know I agree with you 100%, Black Magic. I agree. Sorry, I make those mistakes all the time too. Let me not do that, because you'll see my I've been put, like, I spell things wrong on thumbnails all the time. Sorry. Black Brown Skin says true. Pro Woman says agree 100%. Make it as hard as for them as they do for you. Black diasporans should get preference over non-Black people, even if they've been there for some time. Let's privilege ourselves first. Black people and African people are afraid to utilize progressive efforts of Black racism to benefit them. As yes, Black racism can benefit the collective vastly. I mean, I don't believe in, because the idea of racism is actually, okay, you don't have to have a zero-sum game, meaning in order, like, I have to win and you have to lose. I don't necessarily believe in that viewpoint. So I think that that's the way that is phrased, is the idea of Black racism, meaning like suppressing other groups. I don't believe in the suppression of other groups. I just believe in the acceleration of certain groups, right? Like, I think you can still accelerate certain groups, move them to the front of the line, assist them in getting citizenship because of all the reasons that you say you want to do it as a country, right? While also making other people go through the normal means of getting citizenship, as always. That's all. That's the way I believe it. Ellie Sparkles, FKA Ellie Sparkles, says the economic implications. How much land can they purchase? Great question. Don't know. Ryan says Ghana doesn't understand what they have done. With the money they have, will they outbuy the locals? Possibly, probably. Miss S says, I believe that we can have greater success in getting quick pathways to citizenship if we collectively write the African Union. We need a letter writing campaign to express what we need as returnees. Good points. Only three what? I didn't catch that one, Belinda Davenport. Can you give a little more context, please? Antiquity Queen, you are correct. Patterns tell us that in 50 years, they will become the majority. Ghana will be another America. Blueprint says things are about to get expensive for locals, and they've already been expensive for locals. Ufuma, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, says, I just hope one day Africans will spend more time accelerating individual economic value, will make Black very relevant. Okay. Zoo and Shayna say, this is hella crazy to hear. White folks already get an upper hand in Africa solely based on their skin color. What is their real motive for gaining this citizenship? What does Ghana gain from this? What I would imagine is it's preferential treatment for specific people and groups of people for whatever reason. You know, I think if you look into this, maybe in 5 or 10 years, we'll probably see who these groups were and why they were given citizenship. It's likely because many of them have relationships, government relationships. That's what I would imagine. Blueprint says, if these people have made significant contributions to the country, then they should be granted citizenship with some restrictions. You can't really do citizenship with restrictions. Either you're a citizen or not. You know, it's hard. You know, when it comes to government, right? You'll notice that they make sweeping decisions, right? They don't want to make exceptions because then everyone can find a way to be an exception. So they just make a law and make a rule and do it one way. So it's very difficult for a country to make someone a citizen with exceptions. You know, that just doesn't work that way. And let me just say this. I just renewed my Ghanaian residency. I am a non-citizen resident of Ghana. Let me show you guys what that looks like. So I didn't get my citizenship either, but I also wasn't fully aware of the process. Let me see if I could show you this without showing any pertinent data or information. Yeah. So you see it says Republic of Ghana, non-citizen ID card. And my picture looks a little crazy. Don't clown me for the image. I was very tired that day, but I did get it in the same day, but it was about 6-hour process to get it. But I also had to just renew one that I had previously. But yeah, so I am a non-citizen resident of Ghana. So they make it very clear you are not a citizen. So that is what it is. That's just who I am to Ghana at this point. Job Breed TV says Benin is working to destabilize the AES. No, can't be part of that. That's a good point. Antonio says Dynast has 3 citizenships: Nigeria, US, and Sierra Leone. I did see that. Yeah, I did see that. If I'm not mistaken, I think I saw. I mean, I know for sure he had Sierra Leone in the US. Miss S says, that's interesting that your friend was not granted citizenship because Jay Cameron of YouTube also has citizenship in Sierra Leone and just got citizenship this month as well. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how it happened. Seemed to work out for Jay. I did see that, and a few other people too. I don't know. Skip past that. Because shout out to Jay. Jay is great. I appreciate Jay. I went to Tanzania with Jay's group. The company is awesome. I'm glad he got citizenship. I don't want to jeopardize that. Let's move on. Black Magic says, rise. Yes, Ghana is making a mistake. However, we mustn't forget that Rwanda also has prepared to accept the UK's failed asylum seekers. This would have had a devastating impact on their demographics. Currently, the Benin Embassy website doesn't have much information other than that the law has been put in place for the provisional citizenship for Afro-descendants. Remember South Africa? I think that's what people are saying about, that's what Blueprint is saying about Ghana. The president did that to be spiteful because he knew he was out. This is what Stony Ya is saying in terms of why people got citizenship. KJ says, unfortunately, the world doesn't work that way. Specifically what, I don't know. Racism in the etymology sense would be race first nationalism, as Garvey proclaimed. A racist should mean one who is pro their own, not anti anyone else. Although that's what it should mean, that's not what it's come to mean. So I think we have to just be careful with the terminology we use, even if we know that it had one meaning before. That's not how it's used today. So, you know, I think we should probably use different terminology so it's more clear. It kind of reminds me of the idea of abolish the police, right? And I think what people really meant was police reform, but abolish the police is what stuck. And now you have this idea that people think that all police should go away. And most people who were saying abolish police were really talking about police reform, but major overhauls to the police system. And, you know, now it has bad branding, right? So branding is important, right? So, you know, words do matter. And so I do try to be careful with with language we use when it comes to some of these things and these topics. Okay, O'Shea Duke Jackson calls Dr. Umar something. Yeah, I mean, look, he was one of the people who got citizenship on this last trip. I have no opinion except the fact that, you know, he has some very controversial viewpoints, and I'm not sure the school has yet been built. So there have been many people who've invested, and people are wondering what has happened with the school. But other than that, though, he has been a vocal person around the idea of Pan-Africanism. That's what I do know. I'll leave it at that. Ja Breed says, can't appeal to the African Union, especially is the Kenyan candidate wins secretary generalship. We can take back that citizenship anytime, bro. Ghana is saying. Stony Yam skipping here comments. Kwame says Benin, Burkina Faso are offering citizenship. Is Burkina Faso offering citizenship? I hope so. Manelik is in the building. What's up, bro? What's up? Okay, I'm moving on from that. Would you say that as an African-American woman, navigating Ghana would be more difficult or the same as an African-American man? Thanks for your insight. I would say it'd be more difficult because navigating the world as an African-American woman is just more difficult than it is in general than a man. Because if you think about this, right, many people on the continent still operate in such a way that women who tend to be assertive can be seen negatively by many people on the continent. Also, just in general, right? I mean, in terms of your own personal safety. Now, Ghana is a very safe country, but I feel more safe walking down a dark street than you would, right? And so I just think just in any situation that is the case. But in general, I mean, it's safer as a country than the United States by far. I mean, Ghana is top 10 safest countries in the world. I think the United States is in the 40s. So, you know, I mean, is it safe? Fairly easy to navigate? I would say yes. I mean, I have plenty of people that I know as women who moved to Ghana and are thriving and are living just fine. No issues whatsoever. I do know one woman in particular who's been robbed once. Her house has been broken into. So sometimes those things can happen. But in general, it's just easier. Under the incoming administration in the U.S., I doubt we will accept refugees moving forward. Unfortunately, he's already talking about mass deportation, but we'll see how it all plays out. Yes, some things are easier said than done. Job Reed says, racism is not used that way today because it solidifies the gains that whiteness made by following a race-first strategy that was also anti-Black while preventing Blacks from being race-first. Sure. Don't disagree with that. Cali is active says, yes, Burkina is no visa needed, but does it mean citizenship? No visa needed versus citizenship are two different things. Job Reed says, can you find out about Burkina Faso no visa requirement? If so, can you do a show on availing oneself of that process? I will, Job Reed, for sure. Face Mask says Ghana always brings black people together. That's why they invited Ibrahim Traore. President Mahama invited Burkina Faso brave Ghana during the inauguration day. He was there. Kwame is asking about Jay Cameron's citizenship. Happy for him. Yes, he does have citizenship. Ghana One Hustlers Yah says we shouldn't make such a big deal out of white folks getting citizenship. Africans are getting citizenship here in the West as well. Again, it's how citizenship is getting obtained. Zango Native says women can be assertive without being rude and combative. Yes, true. I think what I'm saying is that there are many people on the continent that see assertiveness as rude and combative. That's what I'm saying. I am a product of a very assertive mother and 4 sisters that are very opinionated and assertive. And so I see that as a positive. Not everyone does. Right. So I think that that's the important part that we need to communicate. But this is not a conversation about sex. All right. So we're not getting into men and women and all of that kind of stuff, because I don't want to. We can go on for days and hours, and that's not what the topic is about. We can have that conversation at a different time if we want to talk about, patriarchy, matriarchy, patriarchal societies, all that kind of stuff. If you want to have those conversations, we can do that and make it relevant to the continent of Africa, but not this particular conversation. Face Mask says, if you are so-called white or Chinese, disrespect Ghanaians, the chiefs, the land can kick you out no matter what. Sure, to a degree, I say, sure, yeah. Not always though. That doesn't always happen. In fact, some people are rewarded for bad behavior. I've seen it with my own 2 eyes, or 4 eyes. 4 eyes, as I've been called once, because I wear glasses. All right. So there's been a lot of comments, and many of you joined. I mean, this is probably the most engaged live stream I've had when it's just been me by myself on the live stream. So it sounds like this content has been really, really interesting to you guys. I'm going to keep responding to questions or comments if necessary. Gertush is laughing at something. Maybe something I said was funny. I don't even know. We're live, folks. So sometimes I say things that I don't know what I've said. I just hope that I haven't offended anybody through the process. Shout out to the alkaline water. Hawaiian volcanic water. Naturally alkaline with electrolytes. Deep well water. Anyway, if you guys ever want to sponsor me, that brand right there, let's have a conversation. All right. Any other comments, thoughts? Jabri says, yeah, bro, we need to develop human resource bank for self-repatriation as part of the development efforts of those reclaiming sovereignty. There are definitely communities popping up all over the continent of Africa, but I know one for sure in Kenya. I know a few in Ghana, right? The guys from Shaka Bars and that group that does financial education, they're working on a city or development. Dre Taylor is working on a development in Abri. You have Migrating Culture Crossing. People like Alita also has a neighborhood where she's building. I think there are many folks working on groups. And so there are places that people can go for sure. Yeah, for sure. So yeah. So Ghana One Hustle Yao says, how can we bring Dr. Umar and Tariq together? Yeah, I don't know. That is above me, as they say on the internet, as the kids say. I don't know. I mean, I sort of follow both of them, because of the platform that I have. I see content from both of them. I don't know. I see this thing. Egos, I think, they're just, maybe if they put the egos to the side and sit down and have a conversation, they probably realize they have more in common than they don't. Zango Native says, I'm Ghanaian, but checking in from Washington State. Shout out to Washington State. Face Mask says, everyone should share, subscribe, and punch that like button. Absolutely. Everybody hit that like button immediately and share this and subscribe to the platform if you haven't already subscribed. Subscribe to Authentic African and follow on all platforms. I want to say the YouTube channel is really starting to grow. I mean, I think we just got 500 subscribers in the last 13 days, 530 or something in the last 13 days because I hadn't hit my 500 subscriber goal by December 31st. But in the last 2 weeks since coming back, you guys have really, you know, upped it and brought a bunch of people on. So I really appreciate that. So yeah, I mean, yeah, and then also we've hit over 400,000 Instagram followers too. So I appreciate all of you guys for really helping this platform grow and bringing this to the masses. That's a goal, and we're obviously we have really high goals. We want to get to 1 million across everything. You know, we're over 500,000 across everything, but we need to get to 1 million across everything before the end of this year. And ideally, we want to get this YouTube channel to 100,000 subscribers sooner than later. I'm not going to put a timeline on it, but you guys can help us get there. We want to spread the message and share this knowledge with as many people as possible. Gertrude says, I'm laughing because I think 300 whites are too many. Fred Bantu says, bring back African news stream. African stream. We're working on it. We're working on it. Trust me. Trust me. There's some conversations happening. It's really tough, man. They got kicked off of all platforms. You know, shout out to Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State under the previous administration. He's the reason why they were shut down. So, you know, Black Magic says 104 watching, only 4 likes. Get the likes up, peeps. Show the bros some love. 140 watching, and that's just on YouTube. We got folks watching across all platforms, and I do. Oh, sorry. You know what? Let me take a look at this. Actually, it's okay. Yeah. Mostly on YouTube. 141, 53 likes. Come on, everyone, hit that like button. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yes, everyone hit that like button. Can you do a series with those who know doing such repatriation efforts? And do you know any governments that are actively supporting those societies and efforts? So I've done individual streams. So if you look at Kia Wakeso Simmons, Traverse Culture, I did a live stream, two live streams with her where we talk about this, what she's working on. I've done 2 live streams with Alita Israel. I did a tour and an interview with Eric McNeil with Migrating Culture Crossing. And I have an interview coming out soon with Dre Taylor. So to answer your question, I have been doing interviews and series and live streams with some of these folks. So you can find those on the channel. I just named them all. Just watch this again and go back to this section and just, do a search in my YouTube channel. You'll find all these people. I know I just said, like 4 times in a row. I've been talking all day. So yeah, that series will be coming. 145 watching, only 4 likes. Okay, we got to that. Joe, are you live tomorrow, Tuesday evening? I'm looking forward to the Dirty December report. I was supposed to go live today to do the Dirty December report, but I mean, this thing kind of took over. So I went live on this today. I will do the Dirty December report. If it's not next Monday, it'll be coming. Trust me, it'll be coming. I may just do a separate live stream about it. Because I do want to tell you guys about that. Good times. Lots of interesting stuff. So we'll talk about it. Dr. Umar is busy getting money from his. Oh God, yeah. Okay, all right. I don't know anything about the school, guys. I heard about it. I know that people are upset about it. We're not going to talk about that. We're not talking about that today. Deborah Ross says they're there to try and lord over the native Ghanaians. I hope the Ghanaians got their hands in position for a molly-whopping. So many molly-whopping. I haven't heard that in a long time. Getting molly-whopped. That's a phrase I haven't heard in a very long time. I'm old enough to remember when people used to say that, molly-whop. Face Mask says we should push our brother channel to 200,000 subscribers by the end of this year. I like that thought process, Face Mask. We should. We absolutely should. And folks like Pro Woman, who's been here since the beginning, says, I hope you're remonetized. Heard YouTube is remonetizing people and pushing smaller channels. I have been monetized again. Yes, I have. If you watch some of my videos, you'll notice that you'll see some ads in those videos now. So we've gotten back into the YouTube partner program. But I have to do some things to finish the process. But we're back in the YouTube partner program. So eventually you guys will be able to get on here and to be able to support. But in the meantime, if you want to support financially the platform, I might as well put that out there. You can shoot Zelle or Cash App to either of these 2 folks here. So authenticafricanlife@gmail.com. You can Zelle that, or you can send Cash App to $Authentic African. We've been going so long, my light has turned off. Hopefully you guys can still see me. Thank you for answering and for the work you do. I appreciate you. May the Lord empower your efforts. Peace be with you. I appreciate that. Job Reed, for sure. We need more live videos like this. More are coming, trust me. Is it Cynical? Cynical says, I just realized I was unsubbed from you. I've heard this before. And I don't know what's happening with the unsubbing, you know, and maybe it was because of my my connection to African Stream for some time. It's happened more than once. So if you are unsubbed, check, make sure you're subscribed. After this live stream is over, just make sure you subscribe. And what I would empower you all to do, or implore you all to do, is to send this to 3 people you know. Send this to 3 people you know and tell them that they should subscribe to the channel. I think if we do more of that, we'll get this in front of more people. And to be clear, guys, I don't make money. I mean, I generate revenue, but I don't make a profit on YouTube. I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine who's starting a YouTube channel. I do all of this for the love. I mean, obviously, I plan to make money from this, of course, but I actually lose money on YouTube every month because I have folks that I pay to do content creation and to edit videos and to post and stuff like that. So just so you know, that's why I put up this banner at the bottom if you want to support by tipping, because this is for the love. You know, I'm passionate about this. You know, I've been running the Instagram page since 2019. I've been running the YouTube channel since 2020. I think I got on TikTok in 2022, Facebook around the same time. So, you know, all of this stuff that I'm doing, all the content I'm posting across all platforms, I am paying out of pocket to do this. I am not making money from this. So I just want you guys to all be very aware of that. I will be doing more of that. I'm getting another phone call that I cannot answer. Let me just let them know I'm on a live stream. I hope it's not like a critical, crucial thing. Let me just do a quick message. All right. Sometimes you don't know if it's like, you know, mission critical. Job Reed says, I just encouraged a Telegram channel of a couple hundred Black folks working on reclaiming their sovereignty to subscribe to your channel. Thank you, Ja. Appreciate that. I really do appreciate that. We'll see how many of those folks join. Yeah, so in the meantime, you know, without having an African stream, I will do my best to try to help to bring some of those stories to light. I mean, this is something that African stream actually reported on too. So I'm going to try to do that as well. We'll have to figure out how we can do that because I don't know how much longer African Stream will be operating on Twitter the way they have been. So as much as possible, I will try to continue to bring those stories to light and to continue to have conversations like this. It seems important, and many of you joined because you wanted to be involved in this discussion. So we'll try to have more of them. All right, guys, we've been live for 1 hour and 27 minutes, and you know, I'm running out of steam here. So Stanley Blackson says, read your Bible because they are doomed anyway, saith the Lord Elohim. Reading is so fundamental. I think everybody has their own religious beliefs, but I will agree that reading is fundamental. That's for sure. So whatever religious doctrine you follow and belief systems, I say stick with it. Zongo Native says, do you have an understanding of the oil and gas sector? I don't hear diasporans talking about that sector. There's huge money to be made there. Yes, true. That's true. And I am someone who does believe that that oil and gas should be explored more by folks. I am just not a big fan of oil and gas, the industry in general. I know that every other nation around the world has had advancements, and Africa, unfortunately, is mostly exporting it. you know, a lot of crude oil, and then it's getting refined and getting resold in Africa. So I don't agree with that. But I have challenges with oil, the oil use of oil to begin with, because it's not an infinite source, right? So at some point it's going to run out. And so I think we should think about, you know, alternate ways to, you know, to run all the things that we're running. And then also too, I'm not 100% sure that if we deplete all of the world's resources of oil, that the planet will operate the way it should. So, you know, you're kind of removing an entire repository of something. It's bound to have long-term effects. I mean, we've only been using oil for a little over 100 years. So, you know, we don't really know what the long-term implications of it are longer than that. Eldercraft says, a young guy in Nigeria developed a car that runs on water. I have heard about that. I'd like to see more of it. There was also a Black American that did at one point in time. It was another person as well. And they tend to always disappear. So there's all kinds of conspiracies about that too. All right, guys, fading quickly. So look, guys, again, share this with anybody you know who's thinking about coming to the continent. The platform in general is about expressing you know, what my experience has been like. And, you know, I go back and forth now to the continent often. I just came from Ghana just over a week and 3 days ago. I was in Sierra Leone a week prior to that for 3 weeks. I was there in September and October of last year as well. And I was living there until March of last year, until May of last year. And so I do plan to go back often. You know, I'm planning another trip, you know, in May or so, another trip over the summer, and then again in December. So we'll have a lot more to talk about as I go back and forth, and I'll continue to interview folks who are going back and forth to the continent, who live on the continent, so we can share what that experience is like. And with that, I want to thank you guys all for watching. I will see you all on the next video.
Ghana,
Yeah, Ghana.
thank you, Ghana.